I was hired to read stories to a man who doesn't age. The first visit. They say everyone has a price. I didn't know mine until a strange old man offered me $5,000 a week just to read him stories. No strings attached. Just come to his house, sit by his bed, and read to him for a couple of hours every night. Seemed too good to be true. I was desperate for money. Rent was overdue, I hadn't sold a story in months, and my fridge was emptier than my inbox. So when the email came through with the subject line, "Private reading job, generous pay," I didn't think twice. It was brief. No sender name, no number, just instructions. Come to 314 Oak Hollow Road. Begin tonight. Bring a book. The drive out to Oak Hollow was unnerving. The GPS took me down twisting backroads, where tree branches clawed at my windshield and fog hovered like ghostly breath over the asphalt. There were no other houses for miles. Just woods. Heavy old woods. When I pulled into the gravel driveway, my headlights washed over a grand, decaying mansion. 3 stories high, all gables and turrets, with vines crawling up the sides like they were trying to strangle it. The porch light flickered faintly, like it was struggling to stay alive. I parked and stepped out, clutching my copy of Dracula. Figured the irony might amuse whoever lived here. Before I even knocked, the front door creaked open. No one stood behind it. Inside, the house smelled of dust and mildew. The walls were lined with oil paintings, portraits of solemn men in outdated clothing. Their eyes followed me as I stepped cautiously through the foyer. Then I heard it, a slow, deliberate tapping. It echoed down the hallway. Tap, 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 like someone stirring tea with a spoon. I followed the sound to a door at the end of the corridor. A brass plaque read, "Mr. Alaric Thorne." I hesitated. There was something about that name. Familiar in a way that made my skin crawl. I knocked. Silence. Then a voice, smooth and deep, answered, "Enter." He was sitting in a velvet armchair by the fireplace. The room was dim, lit only by the flickering flames. He wore a black suit, perfectly pressed, and his hair was silver, but not thinning. His face was lined, yes, but it didn't sag like a man his age. He looked timeless, in a way that was unnerving. "You're the reader," he said. It wasn't a question. "Yes," I replied. "I was told to start tonight." "Good. Begin." That was it. No introductions. No pleasantries. Just an outstretched hand pointing to a nearby chair. I opened Dracula and began to read. My voice sounded too loud in the quiet room, echoing strangely off the high ceilings and velvet drapes. He didn't move as I read. Didn't blink. Didn't sip water. He just stared into the fire, hands folded in his lap. It went on for nearly 2 hours. When I finally paused to clear my throat, he said, "That's enough for tonight." And just like that, I was dismissed. He didn't offer thanks. Didn't ask for my name. He simply turned his head slightly and said, "You'll come again tomorrow." I left without a word. My car was the only sound in the silence of the woods. That night, I dreamed of him sitting in his chair, only now his eyes were black pits and his mouth stretched unnaturally wide as he repeated the word again, over and over. The next night I returned. He was in the same chair, same clothes, same posture. Again I read. Again he sat still as a statue. But something was different this time. The fire was out, yet the room was warm. Unnaturally warm. And halfway through the reading, I felt like the shadows in the corners of the room shifted. Like something was listening besides him. When I looked up from the page, I noticed something that hadn't been there before. A painting above the fireplace. It was a portrait of him, Mr. Thorne, but he looked younger. The same piercing eyes, the same silver hair. But the lines in his face were gone. The painting was dated 1894. My voice faltered. "Is that you?" He turned to me slowly. It was. I stared at him. "That would make you old," he said flatly. "Very old." He smiled for the first time, and I wished he hadn't. His teeth were too straight, too white. And when he smiled, his eyes didn't. They just stared sharp as razors. "You'll find," he said, "that I don't age as most men do." I left shaken, but I needed the money. I told myself it was just a rich eccentric, clinging to immortality fantasies. The old elite are weird like that. Right. On the third night, I brought a different book. The Strange Case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. Felt appropriate. Midway through the reading, I heard a whisper. Not from him. Not from me. From the room. A soft voice like wind through a graveyard. I stopped reading. "Did you hear that?" He didn't answer. Just looked at me, his eyes darker now, like storm clouds before lightning. "Keep going," he said. I wanted to leave, but something rooted me to that chair. So I read. But my eyes kept flicking to the painting above the fireplace. The version of him in the painting looked even younger now, as if he'd lost a few years. The smile on painted Alaric's face was more smug, more alive. My stomach dropped. Whoa. I was imagining things. It couldn't be. When I glanced back at Mr. Thorne, I noticed something else. The lines on his face were lighter. His skin tighter. Fresher. Closed the book. "I'm done for tonight." He frowned. "You'll stay." It wasn't a request. A gust of wind slammed the shutters closed outside, and the room went dark, except for the flickering embers of the fireplace. "No," I said, voice trembling. "I'm leaving." He rose slowly from his chair for the first time in 3 nights. He was tall. Much taller than he seemed sitting. And he moved like someone much younger. Fluid. Graceful. "Your voice," he said, stepping toward me, "does something to me. It feeds something that hasn't eaten in a very long time." Backed away. "What do you mean?" He tilted his head. "Stories are old magic. Words are power. And your voice. Your voice wakes something in me. Something ancient. Something hungry." I turned and fled. As I slammed the front door behind me, I heard him whisper through the keyhole. "Come back tomorrow, reader. Or I will come to you." I didn't sleep that night. The money was still in my account. 5,000 just like he promised. But I didn't care. Something is wrong with Alaric Thorne. He's not just an old man. He's not just eccentric. I think the stories. I think they're making him younger. And I think if I keep reading, I might not live to finish the last page. But if I stop, he might come looking for me. And I don't think I'll survive what followers. The portrait changes. I didn't plan on going back. After that night, I packed a small bag and crashed at a friend's place across the city. I kept my phone off and ignored the constant hum in my mind, that echo of Alaric's voice. "Or I will come to you." The money still sat in my account. Felt like blood money now. 2 days passed. Then 3. Nothing happened. No messages. No strange visitors. I started to believe maybe I'd imagined the whole thing. That it was just the house, the creepy setting, the weird lighting, some elaborate mind trick. But on the 4th day, my phone buzzed to life even though I hadn't turned it on. There was one message. "You left your story unfinished." I threw the phone across the room. That night my dreams turned black. Not just dark, but a full absence of color, light, or form. I was falling into nothing. But I wasn't alone. A voice followed me down. "You are the only one who can finish this." When I jolted awake, gasping, I knew 2 things. 1, I had to go back. And 2, if I didn't, something worse than nightmares would find me. The mansion looked unchanged as I pulled into the gravel driveway again. Except the porch light no longer flickered. Glowed steady. Like it was waiting. The door creaked open before I touched it. Inside the air was thicker. Heavier. The hallways seemed darker, though I could have sworn there were more candles lit than before. I found him in the same chair. Same suit. Same firelight. But something was different. He was smiling. "You returned," he said softly. "I knew you would." I didn't respond. My heart was pounding too loud for speech. "You dreamed of me," he added, almost lovingly. "I didn't want to," I muttered. "No one ever does," he said. "But you did. And you will again." He gestured to the book still lying on the side table. Continue. This time I brought the picture of Dorian Gray. I don't know why. Maybe some unconscious urge for poetic irony. I opened the book with shaking hands and began to read. My voice felt smaller, like the words were being pulled from me instead of spoken. And as I read, I dared to look up. The portrait above the fireplace had changed again. He looked younger still, no longer middle-aged but maybe early 30s. His hair was darker, his features sharper, more angular. The arrogance in the eyes had deepened. Chill swept through me. I looked back at Alaric in the chair. He was changing. Before my eyes, subtly, slowly, like time itself was reversing. His skin had color now, less pale. His cheeks fuller. There was even a faint gleam in his teeth as he smiled wider. You see it, he whispered. I dropped the book. I can't do this. You must. I won't. He stood. The shift in his height still caught me off guard. He always seemed so still, so statuesque until he moved. And when he did, the room itself seemed to bend slightly toward him, like gravity favored him more than anyone else. He stepped closer. I was once like you, he said. Young, curious, foolish. Backed away. You're not just staying alive, I said. You're feeding. He tilted his head. Words have weight. Emotion gives them flavor. You speak the stories and I drink them. You give them life. And I take it. My mouth was dry. My skin felt cold. Why me? Because your voice sings with sorrow, he whispered. Loss. Desperation. You've suffered, haven't you? I didn't answer. He already knew. My last reader was old. He lacked the vibrance I needed. But you, he reached out a hand. You are music. I swatted his hand away and ran. But the door didn't open. No matter how hard I pulled, twisted, kicked, it wouldn't budge. It was like the wood itself refused to let me go. Behind me, his footsteps were silent. But his voice carried. You will return tomorrow. You always do. Then everything went black. When I woke up, I was lying on my apartment floor. My phone sat next to me, its screen glowing. The timer read, reading time 2 hours. No missed calls. No messages. But the book, Dorian Gray, was sitting open on my nightstand, flipped to a page I hadn't reached yet. The line at the top read, behind every exquisite thing that existed, there was something tragic. I didn't remember reading that. But my voice felt hoarse. My throat burned. And on the inside of my wrist was a faint mark, like a smudge of ink that looked eerily like an open eye. The next day I tried to find the mansion on a map. 314 Oak Hollow Road didn't exist. I searched for Alaric Thorne online. Nothing. No records. No address. No obituary. No history. I even tried going back with a friend. But the road was gone. Every GPS I tried rerouted me. Even the trees on the roadside looked different. Denser, almost like they were closing in to hide the path. And then a single text. Stop searching. You'll come back when I call. I threw the phone into a river. But 2 nights later, I was reading to him again. I don't remember how I got there. Only that when I opened my eyes, I was seated in the velvet chair. He was already waiting. I missed your voice, he said, smiling like a satisfied beast. I didn't fight it. Opened the book. I read. And the painting smiled. It wasn't just a younger version anymore. The painting's expression had changed entirely. It was smirking, like it knew something I didn't. And its eyes, they weren't looking straight ahead anymore. They were looking directly at me. The library below. It was raining when I woke up. Not a soft patter against the windows, but a violent, thrashing downpour that made the world outside look smeared and gray. I was in my own bed again, clothes still damp, the scent of old paper clinging to me like mold. My phone, which I had thrown into the river, sat charging on my desk. The screen blinked once. One new recording. You read so well. My fingers trembled as I played it. The sound of my own voice filled the room, reading a passage I had no memory of. And in that chamber, sealed for centuries, The air breathed back. Then a whisper followed, not mine. Almost time. I couldn't live like this. Slipping between realities, between time. I had to know what was happening. I started researching again. Not for Alaric this time, but for that house. Any record of a mansion out near the woods, any whispers of something ancient. My fingers led me through rabbit holes. Urban legends. Blogs from occult hobbyists. Forgotten forums with last posts from years ago. Then I found it. A thread titled, The Immortal Listener. There were only 2 posts. The first read, If you find him, don't read aloud. And the second, He doesn't just listen. He records you. That night, the rain never stopped. I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that painting smirking. I saw Alaric growing younger, hungrier, as if the stories I read peeled the years off his bones. And I felt older. My bones ached. My hair, was it thinner? My reflection looked tired in ways sleep couldn't fix. The next time I found myself in the mansion, I wasn't surprised. The fireplace roared. The room smelled of old velvet and cedarwood. But Alaric wasn't in his chair. The book lay open on the side table, pages rippling though there was no wind. I called out, unsure whether to feel relieved or afraid. Then I heard it creak. From the far side of the room, behind a wall I'd never paid attention to, a section slid open with a groan of age and weight. A staircase spiraled down into the darkness. Candles lit themselves as I stepped forward, one by one. Small golden flames trembling as though afraid of what lay below. I should have turned back. But I didn't. The air grew colder as I descended. Not just cold, stagnant like it hadn't moved in 100 years. And then I saw it. A massive underground library. Columns lined with books. Old books. Ancient. Bound in leathers too smooth to be cowhide. Covers that pulsed faintly when I neared them. In the center of the room stood a pedestal. And it was a book, open. Its pages were filled with handwriting. My handwriting. Every word I'd ever read aloud. Stories, lines, passages. My dreams even. Some things I didn't remember ever saying. Then I heard footsteps. Alaric stepped from the shadows. His face was glowing, no longer young but vibrant. His eyes burned with something between passion and mania. "You've done beautifully," he said, voice reverent. "So few survive the descent. What is this place?" He gestured to the shelves. "A library of voices. Every reader I've ever had. Their words remain, long after they're gone." Backed away. "What do you mean, gone?" He looked almost apologetic. "They always fade. Time forgets them. But their stories stay. It's fair." "Fair," shouted. "You steal their lives and call it fair. They are remembered. Most people die and vanish. My readers become part of something eternal." Turned to run. But the door had vanished. Where there was once the spiral staircase, now there was only stone wall. "Where are the others?" I asked, spinning. "Where are your old readers?" He smiled and raised his hand. Dozens of whispers filled the air at once. Voices, pleading, mumbling, reciting. Sentences stuck in loops. Each shelf began to glow faintly. Then I saw them. Faint outlines embedded in the spines of the books. Faces, pressed into the covers, mouths open in eternal chant, eyes hollow. I screamed. Alaric stepped forward, calm as ever. "You're not like them. You're stronger." I backed into the pedestal. "I'm not going to be one of your stories." He tilted his head. "You already are." Suddenly, the book on the pedestal flipped pages rapidly. It stopped halfway through, revealing a sentence that chilled me to my core. And when she read the final word, she forgot who she was. I slammed the book shut. "No more." He looked pained. "If you stop now, you will rot. The connection is made. Without me, your words fade. You'll forget them. You'll forget everything." "Then I'll forget," I spat. I closed my eyes and whispered a prayer. When I opened them, I was back in my apartment. But something was off. The air felt wrong. I stumbled to the mirror. My reflection was blurry. Not just tired, but smudged like an image on wet paper. My eyes looked too large. My mouth too thin. I could feel the parts of me fraying. I tried to speak, but my voice cracked. A trickle of blood ran from my nose. Then I saw the book. Sat on my table. The cover was blank, but inside were my words. Every line. The last page was still empty. But one line had appeared, freshly inked. She came back again. Because she had no choice. I heard a knock at the door. 3 sharp raps. And then a voice through the keyhole. It's time to read. The man in the book. The knocking wouldn't stop. I curled into myself on the floor, heart pounding, as the voice continued. Calm, rhythmic, inescapable. It's time to read. It's time to read. It's time to read. Then silence. Waited. Minutes passed. When I finally crept to the door and looked through the peephole, there was nothing but an empty hallway. No figure, no shadow. Just the sound of rain beginning to fall again, faint through the windows. I should have felt relief. Instead, dread settled in my stomach like a stone. The book sat on the table, unmoved, unchanged. But something about it called to me, like it wasn't a book at all, but a presence. Felt aware. And hungry. I wrapped it in a towel and stuffed it in a box, taping it shut as if that could trap it. I shoved it into the closet, buried under blankets and clothes, and slammed the door. It didn't help. That night I dreamed again. I stood in a room made entirely of bookshelves. Pages fluttered with no wind. The floor beneath my feet was soft, like walking on old parchment. Alaric stood at the far end. His body shrouded in a shifting blur, like he was made of ink still drying. He held a book. My name was once Eerie, he said, voice echoing. Before I became what I am. I didn't answer. Couldn't. I was a scribe. I wrote stories that no one read. They rotted in dust and silence. And one night, I begged the darkness to make my words eternal. His eyes glowed. It listened. The room groaned. I became the listener. And now I need you. You speak the words. I feed on their echoes. I stepped back. I never agreed to this. You opened the first page. That was enough. A hand reached from a nearby shelf, gray and long-fingered, fingers ink-stained and trembling. Then another, and more. Faces pressed between the books, eyes wide with stories they could no longer speak. And all of them whispered together. Read. I woke up screaming. The book was no longer in the closet. It was on my bed. Open. And the last written line was smeared, like something had dragged its fingers across the ink. That day I didn't go to work. I didn't eat. I spent the entire morning trying to find someone, anyone who had heard of this thing. Forums, Reddit, deep web archives, cult blogs. And finally, buried deep in a comment thread about cursed tomes and forgotten rituals, I found a message dated 1997. He came to me too. The man who doesn't age. The stories are a trap. Every word you speak becomes part of his prison. And his escape. Don't let the book finish. If you do, he becomes real. That night, I locked my apartment door with 3 deadbolts and wedged a chair under the handle. I unplugged my phone, smashed my smart speaker, and turned off all the lights. Still the whispers began. Not from outside but inside the walls. Inside the pages. They told me things I'd never said aloud. Things I had thought once, but never dared speak. They spoke with my voice. I grabbed the book, opened it to the final page, and began to write. I refuse. I won't be your reader. I won't let you win. The ink bled off the page. A shadow spilled across the floor from the book, curling like smoke, climbing the walls. The air turned ice cold. My breath fogged. And from the center of the room he rose. Alaric, Eerie, whatever he truly was, stood not as a man, but a silhouette stitched from words. Paragraphs twisted into limbs. Sentences snaked across his chest like veins. His mouth opened, and I saw nothing but pages fluttering inside his throat. You were never the reader, he said. You were the story. My vision blurred. My apartment faded. I stood once more in the underground library. Only this time the shelves were empty. Only one book remained. My book. He placed it into a slot on the wall. As it slid in, the shelves around it shimmered, and names etched themselves into the bindings. Lucy Kerrigan. Read to Alaric. Vanished. 1976. Thomas J. Reed. Read to Alaric. Vanished. 1983. And then mine appeared. You. Still reading. Vanishing. I screamed. I'm not yours. I'm not. The room pulsed. You're the best story I've ever heard, he said softly. But stories don't choose their readers. I bolted for the wall where the staircase once was. Nothing. Just stone. No doors. No exits. Only shelves. And whispers. Keep going. Just one more page. And then I felt it. The weight of all the words I'd ever spoken pressing against my chest, pulling me down. That night I woke in my bed again. Same apartment. Same rain. Same silence. But something's changed. I no longer recognize my handwriting. My voice sounds hollow when I speak. Mirrors blur when I look into them. And when I open books, even my own journals, I hear his voice reading the words back to me. Not mine. There's one page left in the book now. Still blank. Waiting. And every night at 3:03 a.m., I hear a knock at the door. 3 taps. Always the same. I've stopped answering. But I know I will. Eventually. Because the story isn't over. And the listener is patient. The final chapter. The knock came again last night. 3 sharp raps. Always the same. Always at 3:03 a.m. This time I didn't just hear it, I felt it. A vibration through the floorboards. A thud in my chest. A ripple in the air like the knock was inside me, not just outside the door. I didn't answer. But I didn't sleep either. The book sits on my desk now. That single blank page still waiting at the end, untouched. The paper looks impossibly white, like it's never been part of anything human. Every time I look at it, I hear a hum, a deep, resonating tone that seems to come from nowhere. It's not calling me anymore. It's waiting. I've tried everything to destroy it. I lit it on fire, only to watch the flames stop at the edges of the pages, refusing to touch the ink. I drowned it in the bathtub. It floated for a moment, then dried within seconds. I even took a knife to it, but the blade skidded off like I'd tried slicing stone. The book won't leave. But people have. My friends have stopped replying. My calls go straight to voicemail. Emails bounce back as if the addresses don't exist anymore. I walked down the block to the corner store yesterday. It was gone. Not just closed, gone. A blank building where it used to be, no signs, no windows. As if it had never existed. When I asked someone on the street about it, they looked at me with glassy eyes and said, "There's never been a store there." The world is shrinking. Every time I resist the book, a piece of the world disappears. I don't know how much longer I have. Last night I dreamed again. But it was different this time. I wasn't in the library. I was inside the book. The pages towered over me like walls. The sky was parchment. The sun was a burning candle in the distance. I walked through chapters written in blood, in ink, in memories I don't remember living. And he was there. Alaric. No longer a man. Not even a shadow. He was a voice now, echoing through every line I read. "You've made it so far," he said. "And yet, you still won't finish me." I turned, and in front of me was a door. A wooden one, plain and ordinary. Except it had no handle. Only a small inscription at eye level. "Speak the final line." Behind it I could hear breathing. Heavy. Ancient. Tired. Think it was mine. I woke gasping, drenched in sweat. The ceiling above me warped and shifting like it was melting. That's when I noticed the new entry on the last page of the book. Just one line. "We begin again where the story ends." And beneath it, the faint outline of words waiting to appear. This morning my reflection didn't look back at me. My mirror was empty. My voice is quieter now, like it's being siphoned with every word I say. I know what's happening. The book is writing me out. Not just erasing me from life, but replacing me. I'm becoming a character. And once the page is filled, once the book closes, I'll be nothing but a whisper in the margins. There's only one way to stop it. One last chance. I gathered every candle I owned. Drew a circle in chalk. Sat in the center with the book open on my lap. The final page glowed with a pulsing light, like a heartbeat. I whispered aloud, "I'm not yours. You don't get to end my story." The room trembled. Wind blew through the closed windows. The lights flickered. The walls bled ink. Then he was there. Standing in the corner, cloaked in words, hollow eyes burning. "Finish it," he said. "You owe me an ending." "No," I said. "You finish it. This time you become the story." I held up a pen. Dipped it into my own blood from a fresh cut on my palm. And I wrote the final line on the blank page. The reader broke the cycle by becoming the author. The book screamed. Not with sound but with silence. A roaring, deafening absence that crushed everything around me. My apartment cracked apart. The floor split. Reality frayed at the edges. And Alaric, he shattered. Words exploded off his form like torn leaves in a storm. His scream twisted through the air, and then he was gone. Scattered into sentences, broken into vowels, reduced to fragments of forgotten stories. The book snapped shut. I awoke in the circle of candles, smoke rising in delicate spirals. The book sat closed in my lap, its cover now blank, its pages white. No ink, no words, no voice. It was done. Or so I thought. It's been a week since then. I've gone back to work. The world feels normal again. People answer my calls. The store on the corner is back. But something isn't right. Last night I found a new book on my shelf. It wasn't there before. Plain brown leather cover. No title. No author. Just a single bookmark resting in the middle, waiting. I haven't opened it. I won't. Because I know deep down this story never ends. Just finds a new reader. So if you're ever hired to read stories to a man who doesn't age, don't. Because the real story is you. And he's already listening. The man in the margins started with the shadows. Not the kind that flicker under candlelight or stretch across walls at dusk, but the ones that moved without cause, crept without direction. I would see them out of the corner of my eye. Tall, elongated, twitching like they were studying me. And every time I turned to face them, they vanished. Almost. One morning I noticed something new. My coffee mug, always sitting on the counter, was missing. In its place sat a folded piece of paper, old and yellowed. It looked ripped from a book, the edges torn unevenly. One sentence was scrawled across it in a dark, inky hand. "Even silence has a narrator." Threw it away. But it came back. The next day it was on my pillow. And the day after that, taped to my bathroom mirror. That's when I started hearing the voice again. Not Alaric's. Something older. Something colder. It didn't speak in full sentences. Only fragments. Phrases that twisted in my head long after they'd been whispered. He watches the spaces between words. You are already written. Stories don't end. They just molt. I told myself I was imagining things. That the trauma from the book, from Alaric, from everything I'd endured, was just lingering in my mind. But denial is fragile. It broke the night I saw the man in the margins. I'd been reading to distract myself. Anything that wasn't horror. Romance, science fiction, even cookbooks. Just words. Just pages. And that's when I saw him. On page 42 of a paperback mystery novel, barely visible, wedged between the lines of dialogue, was a figure. Drawn in ink. Taken. Faceless. Standing between two sentences as though inserted there. I blinked, thinking it was a smudge or a print error. But when I turned the page, he was there again. Closer. Every page I flipped he moved. Always between the text. Always advancing. By the end of the chapter, He was at the bottom margin, crouching as though ready to leap off the page. I threw the book across the room. It slammed into the wall, landed spine up. And the last thing I saw before the light bulb overhead popped in a shower of sparks was the shadow of two hands pressed against the inside of the pages, trying to push out. That night I couldn't sleep. I checked every book I owned, tore out pages, burned half of them in my kitchen sink. But he's not in the books anymore. He's in the spaces around them, in the margins of my life. I see him in reflections now. Not directly, no. That would be too easy. He lives in glass and gloss and surface. In the shimmer off a spoon, the glare of a screen, the sheen on a photograph. And always in the background, standing still, watching. I tried telling someone. My sister came over, concerned. I explained what I'd seen, what I'd heard. She humored me, listened quietly, then asked, "Who's the man sitting in the hallway?" There was no one there, but I could feel it, like the air was thicker, like something had just walked through my soul. She left early that night and hasn't called me since. Today I woke up with ink on my fingertips, black, drying, smelling like dust and old wood. I hadn't touched a pen, but there it was, a smear across my hand, leading up my wrist, wrapping around my arm in faint loops and spirals, like handwriting. I ran to the bathroom, scrubbing frantically. Faded. But it didn't go away. It's still there, just under the skin. Words I haven't read yet. Words that might be me. And the whispering has returned. Only now it's my voice. Reading lines I've never written. Telling stories I've never lived. Sometimes it speaks aloud while I'm standing in silence. Sometimes it finishes my thoughts before I have them. I think he's inside now. Not just watching but writing. Not Alaric. Not the book. Something worse. Something that was never meant to be seen. A being that lives between letters, feeds on narrative tension, and waits for the perfect moment to rewrite you. Tonight I found a note under my pillow. Same yellowed paper. Same ink. But this time it wasn't a warning. It was a dedication. To the narrator who thought he had a choice. And beneath that, a familiar phrase. The end begins where the margins bleed. My skin is bleeding now. Not red, but black. It oozes slowly from the corners of my mouth, from under my fingernails, from the whites of my eyes. I try to scream, but the sound that comes out is not mine. It's a sentence. He became a story so the story could survive. That's when I realized the awful truth. I never escaped the book. I just became the sequel. And the man in the margins. He was the author all along. Rewrite. I haven't left the apartment in days. The world outside has grown, unstable. Or maybe it's me. The sounds from the street no longer make sense. Garbled voices like someone flipping through radio frequencies too fast. Sometimes I swear I hear pages turning instead of footsteps. The hum of the city has become a whispering chorus, murmuring lines I don't understand. But inside it's worse. The walls are no longer blank. They're covered in script. It started with faint marks near the baseboards, curling lines like calligraphy. I thought it was mold. I tried cleaning them, but when I touched them I could feel the words. Like braille carved into my fingertips. Like memory etched into drywall. And now it's everywhere. Sentences spiraling across the ceiling. Paragraphs bleeding from the corners. Narratives looping around the doorframe. All in that same black ink I've begun to taste in my sleep. I don't remember writing any of it. But I remember reading it. From Alaric's book. Except, this is different. This story isn't about him anymore. It's about me. It's titled The Narrator. And each day a new page appears. Always describing something I haven't done yet. Something that will happen before the day ends. Like this morning's entry. He wept while feeding his voice to the fire, knowing silence wouldn't stop the ink from spreading. I didn't understand what it meant. Until midday when I tried to destroy my audio equipment. My mic, my recording setup, the hard drives where I'd stored years of voice work. As I pulled cords and cracked plastic, a voice came from the speakers. My own. But not from anything I'd recorded. It was me, narrating something that hadn't happened yet. A scene of me standing over a flaming bin, clutching my throat and whispering apologies to someone named Eli, a name I hadn't spoken in years. My brother. Dead 10 years now. I fell to my knees and screamed, but my voice came out muffled, like someone was recording me from the bottom of a well. That's when the speakers cut to static, and the fire lit itself. I couldn't stop it. The mic stand went up like dry bone. The cords hissed and snapped like angry snakes. The room filled with smoke and ink black ash, and in the haze I saw it. The man. Faceless. Just ink and void. Standing in the corner, head tilted, watching. Like he was pleased. Like he was editing. Passed out. When I woke up, there was a book on my chest. Hardcover. Leather-bound. No title on the front. But I knew what it was before I opened it. The Narrator. By Unknown. It opened to the middle. Chapter 7. The words danced on the page, shifting as I looked at them. But one line was clear. The protagonist no longer tells the story. The story tells him. And under it smaller. Reader beware. Narration is infection. Since then I've stopped trying to speak. Every word I say becomes prophecy. I said I'm scared out loud, and the lights died. I whispered I need help, and all my doors locked themselves. I said please, and something laughed from the closet. It's not just words anymore. The ink is in me. I tried cutting it out. The veins on my arm no longer run red. They spiral like cursive lines. When I sliced my skin, the wound didn't bleed. It spilled letters. Black curling, moving. The words crawled across the floor, rearranged themselves into a sentence. There is no narrator. Only script. I've stopped sleeping. Because sleep is when he writes the most. I wake up with new thoughts that aren't mine. New memories of things I haven't done, but feel guilty for anyway. I remember being a child locked in a library. I remember whispering secrets to a quill that screamed. I remember tearing out my tongue to silence a curse. None of that happened. And yet I remember the pain. The book is always open now. I try to shut it, burn it, throw it away. It returns. It always returns. And each day more chapters appear. Chapter 8 appeared yesterday. The opening line. The narrator tried to escape the story, but found only blank pages waiting to be filled with his screams. I haven't screamed yet. I'm trying not to. But the silence is worse. Because now, the apartment has started to narrate itself. The fridge hums in rhythm, spelling out syllables in vibration. The windows fog with breath that isn't mine. And in the condensation, sentences form. You're not the first. You won't be the last. Turn the page. Last night, my reflection blinked when I didn't. It mouthed something. I couldn't hear it. But I could feel it. You're almost ready. Ready for what? I don't know. But the ink grows deeper. It's in my thoughts now. I think in second person. I dream in italics. I hear the world in monologue. And when I look in the mirror, I don't see a man anymore. I see a character. Flat. Predictable. Trap. And behind me, always behind me, is the man in the margins. He doesn't move. He doesn't need to. 'Cause I am walking toward him. Every second, every page, every paragraph written in my blood pulls me closer. I don't know how many chapters are left. But I found something yesterday. On the back cover of the book. A sentence scratched so faintly I almost missed it. It said, "The story ends when the narrator stops reading." But how do you stop reading a story that's inside you? How do you escape narration when your heartbeat is the punctuation? I'm afraid there's only one way. I have to write the final line myself. Margins of the mind. The silence has texture now. It wraps around me like wet parchment, clinging to my skin, pressing against my mouth, urging me not to speak, not to breathe too loudly, not to think too hard. Because the story listens. It's always listening. And it's no longer confined to walls or books. It's inside the mirror. Inside the hum of the heater. Inside my bones. I feel it every time I blink. A flicker in my peripheral vision, like a shadow just barely out of reach. I've tried taping my eyelids open, but my vision just becomes ink-stained static. I see letters swimming across the air, rearranging themselves into commands. They want me to write, not just read, not just narrate, but I told myself I wouldn't. I swore I wouldn't give in to that last step. But my hands are no longer mine. They twitch toward the pen on their own. My fingers ache with unused stories. My wrists tremble with withheld exposition. There's a blank notebook on my desk now. I didn't put it there. Its pages smell like burned time and wet ink. And on the first page, in small, neat handwriting, it says, "Begin." That's it. No instructions. No name. But I know what it means. I left the room. Slammed the door. But the book was waiting for me in the hallway. I threw it out the window. It appeared on my pillow. I tried to drown it in the sink, only for it to reappear on the kitchen counter, perfectly dry, open to a fresh page. Try again. They say hell is repetition. But this is worse. This is revision. Reality keeps rewriting itself around me. The apartment changes every day now. Doors where there weren't doors. Hallways leading to impossible rooms. The elevator button now says, Chapter 9. I pressed it once. Only once. And I ended up in a corridor that smelled like dead pens and mildew. The floor was carpeted with shredded manuscripts. The lights flickered with every thought I had. And from the other end of the hallway came the sound of a typewriter. Low. Deliberate. Blick. Black. Ink. I walked toward it. I don't remember the steps. I just remember being drawn in like the story was pulling me, needing me, using me. And then I saw him. Alaric. Not aged a day. Not surprised to see me. He looked up from the typewriter and smiled with ink-stained teeth. "You made it," he said. "I was afraid you'd stop before we got to the good part." I couldn't speak. My mouth was full of ash. My voice had been repurposed. He gestured to the chair across from him. A writer's chair. Old. Worn. The kind of chair that had seen too many deadlines and too few breaks. Sat. Not because I wanted to. Because the story needed me to. Alaric placed a fresh sheet in the typewriter and pushed it toward me. "Finish it," he said. "Finish you." I didn't understand. Until I saw the page. At the top, in all caps. Chapter 10, the end. Beneath it, a blinking cursor. Waiting. I looked at him. "Why me?" Alaric leaned back. "Because you're good. You made people believe. And belief gives the story breath." I shook my head. "You could have picked anyone." "I did," he said. "Hundreds. Thousands. All left unfinished. But you kept reading." And then he leaned in close. His voice cold and smooth like wet ink. "You gave me permanence." That's when it hit me. I was never hired to read to a man. I was hired to continue him. Every story I'd read aloud, every word I'd poured into his empty pages, kept his narrative alive. He wasn't immortal because of magic. He was immortal because he was never done. And now I was the final chapter. Ran. Through the corridor, through the shifting rooms, through the bleeding walls of my mind. But even as I ran, the typewriter clacked behind me. Still typing. Still writing. Describing every desperate breath I took. Every turn. Every fall. Blick. Black. Ink. I returned to the apartment. Or something like it. It was different now. Bigger. Deeper. It had shelves made of spines and candles made of melted pens. The floor was paper. The air was heavy with unused words. And in the center sat the notebook. Still open. Still waiting. Begin. Picked up the pen. 'Cause I had to. Because it was already in my hand. Because even the illusion of choice was a line in someone else's outline. I wrote the first sentence. The narrator finally gave in, and the story exhaled. And the walls breathed. They breathed. Then I wrote another. He understood now that stories didn't want to end. They only wanted to survive. And something deep within the building moaned, long and hollow and hungry. Stop. But the pen kept moving. Scratching words I didn't know I knew. Words from languages I'd never read. Names I'd never spoken. Places I'd never been. The story was writing through me. My hands moved, but they weren't mine. My thoughts blurred into paragraphs. My heart beat in stanzas. I tried to scream, but the ink had already filled my throat. And then the final line wrote itself. He looked up and realized he had become the page. The pen dropped. The notebook snapped shut. And in the quiet that followed, I heard Alaric's voice, faint and fading. "Thank you." The lights went out. And when they came back on, I was gone. But the notebook was still there, waiting. Its next page blank. The cursor blinking. Drafted in darkness. I woke up in a room I didn't recognize. That might not sound terrifying, but when you've spent weeks, months, writing yourself out of reality, waking up anywhere at all is a horror in itself. The ceiling above me was covered in text. Not wallpaper. Not paint. Just words. Scrawled in different languages. Different sizes. Bleeding into each other like mold on wet plaster. Some in cursive, others printed in harsh block letters, but all of them moving, crawling like ants made of language. I sat up, and my spine cracked like a closing book. The floor beneath me was stacked with manuscripts, each with a name I didn't recognize, except one. One name stood out like a scream in a library. Marcus Vale. Name. I reached for it, trembling, and flipped through the pages. They weren't typed. They weren't handwritten. They were alive. The letters shifted every time I blinked. Paragraphs restructured. Dialogues rewrote themselves. A scene about me finding the room appeared, disappeared, reappeared with different outcomes. Me screaming, me smiling, me dead. I dropped the manuscript. The moment it hit the floor, the door opened. Not creak. Not slowly. Just opened. Like it was waiting. I should have run, but the story had already outlined this moment. I was where it needed me to be. And I wasn't reading it anymore, I was being read. The hallway beyond the door looked endless. On either side, doors, hundreds of them. Each labeled with a genre. Mystery. Thriller. Romance. Horror. That one pulsed red. Almost as if it had a heartbeat. Course it did. I walked toward it because he wanted me to. Because the narrative had reached the point where choice was an illusion. Inside the horror door was Alaric. He was no longer youthful. He was everything. He stood tall, stretched into the corners of the room. His limbs thin and jointless like lines drawn in charcoal. His face was a mess of fonts. Bold eyes, italic lips, a serif nose. His smile curled like quotation marks. "You've come to revise," he whispered, voice layered like overlapping recordings. I nodded, though I didn't know what he meant. Alaric gestured to a table. And it was a new book. Leather-bound. Bound tight. The cover was blank. No title, no author. Just a surface that rippled like skin beneath cold air. "This," he said, "is the book that ends me." I stared. "You said you wanted to live forever." He laughed. It was a printed laugh, each sound a flipping page. "I do. But I also want to be finished. Immortality without resolution is madness." He leaned closer. "That's why I need you. I can't write an ending," I said. "Not without destroying you." Alaric raised a finger. "Precisely." I stepped back. "I'm not a murderer." "Oh," he mused. "But you are a narrator. And what is death, if not the closing of a story?" I looked at the book again. I could feel it breathing. It wanted an ending. It was tired. All stories are, eventually. I opened the cover. The first line was already written. "This is the final chapter." Alaric began to fade. His outline frayed. Ink bled from his eyes. "You see," he whispered. "It's already begun." Picked up the pen. But my hand wouldn't stop shaking. "I don't know how to end you," I said. "You do," he said. "You just won't admit it." I thought back. Through every story I read, every scene he made me relive, every horror he pulled me through. And I realized the one thing he never allowed. Silence. He lived through words. He fed on them. If I wanted to finish him, I had to give him what he feared most. I flipped to the last page. And I wrote. He said nothing. Alaric screamed. No sound came out. His mouth stretched wide, gaping and empty, a black speech bubble without a caption. His limbs began to dissolve into ellipses. His fingers turned into commas and blew away. His eyes collapsed into blank spaces. The room darkened. I wrote the final line. And for the first time he ended. Everything stopped. The pulsing door, the crawling letters, the whispering pages, all fell silent. The story collapsed into a pinpoint of ink. And then just stillness. I woke up in my apartment. No manuscripts. No haunted mirrors. Just me, my desk, and a blank piece of paper. First I thought it was over. Until I noticed the pen in my hand. It was writing. Not in my handwriting. Not even in English. But it wrote. And the words on the page said. The narrator had done well. But stories like ghosts always come back. I looked into the mirror across the room. And Alaric was standing behind me, smiling. The story that wouldn't die. I didn't scream. What was the point? I'd screamed in dreams before. I'd screamed in rooms that vanished. I'd screamed when the ink crawled under my skin like veins and when Alaric whispered stories through my teeth. But now I just watched. Alaric stood behind me in the mirror, but not in the room. A reflection without a source. A shadow without a body. He didn't move. He just stared, smiling. His teeth formed from quotation marks. His pupils shaped like exclamation points. My hand, still holding the pen, trembled. On the paper before me, new words were forming. You tried to end me, Marcus. But endings are just another kind of beginning. I stood up, backed away. The pen dropped, kept writing. I ran to the mirror, touched the glass. It was cold, solid. But when I pressed harder, it rippled like water over ink. Alaric's smile widened. You're not writing this anymore, he said from inside the mirror. I am. My voice cracked. What do you want from me? He tilted his head. What all authors want, he whispered. A story that lasts forever. The mirror flashed. A surge of light so bright I had to shield my eyes. When I looked again, the world had changed. My apartment was gone. I stood in a library. No, the library. The one from before. Endless shelves. Endless books. The air smelled of dust, decay, and old ink. And around me, readers. Hundreds of them. Eyes stitched shut. Mouths sealed with words. Skin made of parchment. They shuffled between the shelves. Blind, silent, obedient. Alaric stood at the center of it all. Towering, impossible. His body stretched between bookcases, binding the library together like a spine. He gestured, and a book floated into my hands. Had my name on it. Not written, engraved. The Narrator. I didn't want to open it. But my fingers moved anyway. Inside were pages I hadn't written. Couldn't have written. Pages of futures. Twisted possibilities. Scenes where I screamed forever, or disappeared, or rewrote myself into 1,000 fractured selves. I don't want this, I said. But it wants you, Alaric replied. The readers turned. All of them. Their heads tilted in unison, as if listening to a sound only they could hear. Then they opened their mouths, not to speak but to read. In perfect, synchronized monotone, they spoke the first sentence of the book in my hands. The narrator stood in the library, where stories lived and refused to die. I dropped the book. The library trembled. Books fell from shelves like dead birds. The readers convulsed. Alaric hissed. You're interfering again, he snarled. No, I said. I'm reclaiming my story. I turned to run, but the library stretched. The floor pulled beneath me. The shelves grew taller, narrower. Doors appeared between the stacks, but each led to scenes I recognized. Moments from my life, rewritten, corrupted. My childhood bedroom, but the bed was a coffin. My college classroom, filled with corpses taking notes. My mother's kitchen, where she stirred a pot of boiling black ink, humming Alaric's lullaby. I screamed. This time it mattered, because the sound cracked the air like lightning. It tore the page I was trapped in. The readers staggered back. One by one they dropped their books. Their mouths stitched shut again. Alaric roared. "You're not the author." "Maybe not," I said, "but I can be the editor." I raised my hand, and for the first time I chose the words. Not the ones he fed me. Not the ones the library wrote for me. The library burned. The books caught first. Fire licked their spines and turned language into ash. The shelves curled, moaned, and fell. The air grew thick with heat and screams, not from the readers, but from the words themselves. Alaric lunged, but the fire caught him too. His body, made of sentences and stolen stories, blackened, curled inward. His smile turned to ellipses, then periods, then nothing. "No one finishes me," he shrieked. I stood my ground. "Yes," I said. "I do." And then I spoke the final line. The story was over. The fire consumed everything. Closed my eyes. And opened them in my own bed. Morning sunlight spilled through the window. No library. No Alaric. No ink on my skin. Just me. And the pen. Sat on my desk. Motionless. Dry. I approached it with caution. Touched it. Nothing. The paper beneath it was blank. Except for one sentence. "Thank you for finishing the story." I should have been relieved. Should have celebrated. But part of me still listens for whispers when the lights go out. Still flinches at mirrors. Still wonders if Alaric is truly gone, or just waiting between chapters. And sometimes when I close my eyes, I see the library again. Unburned. Restored. Waiting for the next narrator. Waiting for you. Because stories never really end. They just find a new voice.